How's it going, Rogues Gallery, and welcome to another Flesh and Blood video here on Red Zone Rogue. Today, we're going to talk about my Uprising Commoner Battle Box. What is that? Well, that is, in my opinion, not only an absolutely fantastic way to play Flesh and Blood, not only on a budget, but with friends, but I also think it's the perfect way for you to get into Flesh and Blood because, like I said, it's very, very cheap, and it also features 3 very good and strong decks that work very, very well against each other. I wanted to make this video as a follow-up to my previous Flesh and Blood video, the, how to start playing Flesh and Blood, because I figured a lot of people might be like, okay, where do I go next? And I think this is one of the better ways to do so after you've already picked up some Blitz starter decks, or if you've already decided you want to get into Flesh and Blood, and say you bought some Uprising. Well, where do you go from here after you bought some Uprising? Well, I think commoner decks are really, really awesome to start out with because they're easy to build because they only consist of common cards. After you build these decks with your bulk or whatever, you can start upgrading them to top tier competitive decks because all 3 heroes are pretty good in their own rights in different formats. Like Fi is absolutely fantastic in Classic Constructed, Icelander is really, really good in Blitz, and Dromai, well, she's still kind of finding her place, but I think she's fantastic in Ultimate Pit Fight as well as other formats as well. So without further ado, let's go over each one of these decks individually. I will have links in the description down below to FAB where you can find the deck lists for all of this kind of stuff. Down there you can also find various affiliate links to my affiliate partners like Dragon Shield, Forge and Fire Gaming, as well as my own merch store featuring the brand new playmat that we're going to be showing off in today's video. So enough talk. Let's talk some more about these awesome and really, really fun commoner decks. All right, so here is our Uprising Commoner Battle Box featuring every hero from Uprising. We have Fi, Icelander, and Dromai. And you might ask yourself, what is a battle box anyway? Well, I'm using that term to describe a group of decks that you can kind of keep together in a box that play well against each other, and I think these decks play very well against each other. There's kind of like a rock, paper, scissors thing going on here, where the Icelander deck is good against Fi, and the Fi deck is good against Dromai, and the Dromai deck is good against Icelander, and you can kind of mix and match and play, how you see fit, but I think this is a fantastic way to play Flesh and Blood and take that step, beyond the Blitz decks into something affordable and really, really fun and well-tuned, because these are well-tuned decks, even though they are commoner decks. And you also might be asking yourself, if you're new to Flesh and Blood, what's commoner? Commoner is a format in Flesh and Blood where you can only play with common cards for the most part. There's a couple other rules here where you can have like 2 rare pieces of equipment or whatever, but this is all common cards in all 3 of these decks. Most of these decks are made out of only Uprising cards, though there are some exceptions here and there, and I think this is just an absolute blast. Also, Commoner is a format that is going to be supported by Legend Story Studios, or at the very least, it's recognized by Legend Story Studios, so hopefully we see Commoner get more official support in the future, so you can take these and, have decks that you can win prizes at local events and that kind of stuff. So anyway, let's talk about each one of these decks individually and kind of how they function so you can kind of get an idea of it. Also, while I kind of scooch these over to the side, I want to draw attention to our freaking awesome new Vea Dragon Slayer playmat made by the Flesh and Blood artist Krovius. She and I have been working on this for quite a while, even before we knew about Uprising and Dragons. So it's a little bit of serendipity there, but it turned out really well. Available now on redzonerogue.com. Links in the description down below, though I only have a few of these left at the time of this recording, though we will have restocks and whatnot. Anyway, let's talk about Dromai first. So the Dromai deck kind of functions as a mid-rangey sort of deck. Basically, each of these decks has a certain overall archetype, where the Fi deck is definitely aggro. The Icelander and the Dromai deck are a little bit more nebulous, I would say Dromai tends to be slightly more controlling, though Icelander does have a lot of controlling elements as well. These two are a mix of like controlling and mid-rangey kind of stuff, but Dromai is the deck that really ramps up over time, whereas Icelander, you can kind of be mid-rangey controlling, you know, throughout the entirety of your match. So let's talk about Icelander. Let's talk about Dromai first. Dromai, I think, is probably the more complicated of the decks to play, and that's just because her deck really focuses on building up dragons and this kind of army, whereas the other decks, you can kind of just play out your hands bit by bit. So Dromai says, whenever you pitch a red card, create an ash token. And so let's go ahead and grab an ash token here. This is an ash token. It's a Draconic Illusionist token. It is ash. It's a material item. It says, while ash is under an object, that object has phantasm. And it says, when this is defended by a non-illusionist attack action card with 6 or more base attack, destroy this and close the combat chain. So basically, anytime you create one of these Aether Ash Wings, it goes on top of an ash, and then it has that phantasm ability, so your opponent can block it with a 6 attack and destroy it. So this is kind of like a downside, but you know, think of it this way. All of your dragons are made out of ash. And so if your opponent can realize they're an illusion, they can destroy the illusion. That's the flavor there. Let's set all of these ash tokens aside, the deck aside, and we're gonna go over everything very quickly, just so you can kind of have an understanding of what's going on here. So Dromai also has another ability. If you've played a red card this turn, dragons you control have go again while attacking, and then she has the standard 4 intellect and 20 health. So basically she really cares about red cards, right? You pitch red cards to create ash, and then you play red cards to give all of your dragons go again. We also have her weapon of choice, the Storm of Sandakai. It's very simple. It just says, dragon allies you control have once per turn action for cost of 0 to attack. And so the dragon allies that we're going to have are going to be the Aether Ash Wings, which are 1 attack, 1 health dragons that also have Arcane Barrier, which is really important versus the Icelander deck. And Arcane Barrier says, if your hero would be dealt arcane damage, you can pay a resource to prevent 1 of that damage. And so if you have, say, 5 of these dragons out, well, that means you can pay 5 to prevent 5 damage. So they do kind of stack like that. So that's the Storm of Sandakai, very simple. Between these two, it allows us to attack with the dragons, and if we've played a red card, they'll have go again. Next up, we have the Helios Miter. This is a fantastic equipment piece. It's a generic equipment piece head. Instant for 2 resources, prevent the next 1 damage that we dealt to your hero this turn by a source of your choice. Destroy Helios Miter at the beginning of the end phase. You can do this multiple times for each source of damage. So if you are playing against Icelander and they're slamming you with a 5 damage Ice Bolt, well, you can pay 10 to prevent all 5 of that if you have the 10 to pay. We have a lot of red cards in the deck, so it's going to be hard to do that, but it's there. We also have the Sash of Sandakai. This is a Draconic chest piece. Instant, destroy Sash of Sandakai. Gain a resource. Activate this only if you played a red card this turn. So once again, we really want to play red cards. We have the Silken Form. This is the arm piece. This one is a Draconic Illusionist equipment. It has Quell 1, which is great. It says if your hero would be dealt damage, you may pay 1 to prevent 1 of that damage. If you do, destroy Silken Form at the beginning of the end phase. But it also has this instant ability that says, instant, destroy Silken Form, transform target ash you control into an Aether Ash Wing. And what's really cool about this is you can use this Quell ability, right, on your opponent's turn to prevent some damage, but it's not destroyed until the beginning of the end phase. So before that happens, you can use the instant effect to then destroy the Silken Form to create an Aether Ash Wing, which is really good. So this card's fantastic. We also have the Quelling Slippers. It's just a generic leg piece that has Quell. We already talked about Quell. And then here we have some other options, right? And so these options really depend on what you have going on here. The Hope Merchant's Hood is a pretty good headpiece. It just says instant, destroy it, shuffle any number of cards of your hand into your deck, and then draw that many cards. That's really good if you have just a terrible hand. I sometimes like running this over the Helios Miter if I think I can be a little bit more aggressive, because this requires no resources, and the Helios Miter requires 2 per source of damage. The Miter is really good if you think you're going to be rushed down. We have Ironrot Helm, which might even be a little bit better than the Helios Miter against a deck like Phi, because it just has block 1 and Blade Break, which means you can block 1 with it and then it's destroyed, but it's free, you don't have to pay anything to do that. Same with the Ironrot Legs. Hardened Crossstrap is great. You can destroy the Hardened Crossstrap, and the next attack action card you play this turn costs 2 less to play and has Go Again. I actually like the Sash of Sandakai better in this deck because this one only affects attack action cards, and this one just gives us a straight up resource that we can use for anything. But still, there might be situations where you want to run this. Next up, we have Silent Stilettos. This card's really good against certain decks. It says, whenever an attacking ally you control dies, or an attack action card you control is destroyed by Phantasm, you may pay 3. If you do, destroy Silent Stilettos and gain 1 action point. So this is really good against decks that are going to be destroying your dragons and that kind of stuff. It also has Arcane Barrier 1, which is pretty good, but our Aether Ashwings are going to all have Arcane Barrier as well. So Arcane Barrier isn't that important to this deck. And then finally, we have Quelling Robe. It's the same thing as the Quelling Slippers. What's my kind of standard loadout that I do here? Since we are playing Commoner, you do have 11 options for equipment pieces, so that's why we are using the full 11. But for the most part, the cards that I really like to run are these here. We have, let's go with this. I'm gonna say this is my standard loadout here. I would say Helios Miter, Sash of Sandakai, Silken Form, and Quelling Slippers. And then you have these two are the ones that we swap the most often. Hope Merchant's Hood for Helios Miter and Silent Stilettos for Quelling Slippers, just depending on what you want to do. The decks are really easy to build, so I would recommend playing around with it to, so you can figure out what most fits your play style. Let's talk about the deck really quickly. Basically, what we want to do is we want to amass an army of tiny dragons. How do we do that? Well, we play cards that generate ash and then transform those ash into the Aether Ashwings. So cards like this, Billowing Mirage, costs 1 to play, attacks for 3, blocks for 3, has Go Again, and says when you attack with the Billowing Mirage, transform up to 1 ash you control into an Aether Ashwing. So it attacks for 3, but it also creates an Aether Ashwing, and since it itself is a red card, it would give all of our dragons Go Again. So it kind of attacks for 4 here. So yeah, really, really awesome card. Rake the Embers is also incredibly good in this deck. It's a 1-cost action, blocks for 2, has Go Again. You create an ash token and then transform up to 3 ash you control into Aether Ashwings. This is an absolute staple of the deck. Next up, we have Sweeping Blow. This is just a great ash generator. It costs 1, attacks for 3, blocks for 3, has Go Again. And when you attack with it, you create an ash token. And once again, always keep in mind, every time we pitch a red card, we also create an ash. So if you pitch a red card to play this, you would generate 2 ash. We also have Scar for a Scar. It's a red card, 0 for 4. If we have less life than an opposing hero, it has Go Again, which is really good. We just kind of want to play these red cards, give our dragons Go Again. Like, this would be a really good card to save if you have a bunch of dragons and you had to block heavily, right? So you just play your Scar for a Scar. It's 0 for 4. Go Again if you have less life. And then, since it's a red card, it turned on Dromi's ability to give all of the dragons Go Again, and then you can just attack with every single one of your dragons. Same thing with Ravenous Rabble, a 0 for 5, but you have to reveal the top card of your deck, and it gets minus X attack, where X is the pitch value of the card. There's a lot of red cards in this deck, so this is mostly going to be attacking for 5. This is a card from Arcane Rising, not from Uprising, but it's a common, so it's really easy to get. Next, we have Skittering Sands. This is more or less a 0 for 4, so it's a 0. It's a non-attack action, so it's a Draconic Illusionist action, has Go Again. Transform an ash you control into an Aether Ashwing. It gains +3 until end of turn. So basically, turns a ash into a dragon that attacks for 4, which is really good for 0. We're also running the Dunebreaker Cenopai. This one doesn't really synergize with a lot of the other stuff we're doing, but it's a pretty heavy hitting card, and it's a card that lets us just pitch a card to generate an ash. So it's a 1-cost, 5 attack with Go Again, and if it's destroyed, we get to create an ash token. It has that Phantasm ability, so if our opponent blocks with a 6 attack or more, it will destroy the card. So they wouldn't be able to, it would basically destroy the card and they wouldn't take any damage or anything like that. But if it's destroyed, we get an Ash token. So this is a great card. We win no matter what. We either deal him some damage as Go Again, or we still get an Ash token. Next up we have Embermaw Senpai, or Senpai, and it's a 2-cost for 8, which is a lot. This is a card that goes really, really well with that Hardened Cross Strap because it reduces the cost by 2, so to make it free. 2 for 8 is a really, really good rate. Blocks for 3. Has Phantasm, and when it's destroyed, create an Ash token. So same kind of deal as the Dunebreaker, except the Embermaw does not have Go Again, but 2 for 8 is still really good. This is a card that you'll want to do at the end of attacking with a bunch of your dragons. You can attack with a bunch of little dragons and then slam for 8. Next up we have Whisper the Oracle. I really like this card in this deck. It is a 0-cost generic action for 3. This is the red version. You just get to opt 4 and Go Again. And opt 4 just means you get to look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and you can put them back on the top or the bottom of your deck, however you see fit. But what makes this really good is it blocks for 3, but it's a red pitch card with Go Again, so playing this immediately turns on the Go Again for all of your dragons, which is really nice. Next up we have Sand Cover. This is an instant. This is one of our defensive cards. It costs 0, and it says target Ash you control gains Ward 4 until end of turn. And Ward 4 means if your hero would be dealt damage, prevent 4 of that damage and destroy this. So this is basically a 0 prevent 4, which is really good. Just turns one of your Ash into something you can block with, more or less. We also have Sink Below, which is another defensive card. 0, blocks for 4. It's a defense reaction, and it says you may put a card from your hand on the bottom of your deck if you do draw a card, which is really good. Get some filtering there. These are some of the cards we really want to rely on, by the way, because, like I said, we're going to be playing defensively until we can build up our army. So the Sand Cover, the Sink Below, the Fate Foreseen, which is another 0 for 4, and you get to opt 1. Is really good. And then now we have our yellows and blues, and these are all cards we've seen before. So we have more Rake the Embers, Billing Mirage, Skittering Sands. These are all cards that I think are premium cards, all really, really good, like staples of the deck, just generating a bunch of Ash Wings. Same here, we have blue Rake the Embers, Billing Mirage. Sweeping Blow is great. A 1 that still generates an Ash token is really good. Dunebreaker is still a 1 for 3. Mostly we will want to use this to pitch or block. And we also have another Skittering Sands. These cards here, we mostly use them just to play our other cards, but some of these just are really, really solid in their own right. And that's basically this deck. You just want to, hold out as long as you can and build up an army of those Aether Ash Wings. And, you'll have like a death by 1,000 cuts kind of situation when you have like a bunch of these out. You attack with one, and you attack with another one, and you attack with another one. And yeah, so that is the Dromai deck. Let's talk about the Icelander deck. This one is quite a bit different and has the most trouble against Dromai because Dromai has all of that arcane barrier and other ways to prevent things. So Icelander is an elemental wizard. She only has 18 health, so less health than Dromai and Phi, but she has Essence of Ice, which means you can have ice cards in her deck. If it's not your turn, you may play blue non-attack action cards from your arsenal as though they were an instant, so keep that in mind. We really care about blue non-attacks, and we can play them on our opponent's turn from our arsenal. And it says, whenever you play an ice card during an opponent's turn, you create a Frostbite under their control. And what is a Frostbite? Well, this is a Frostbite. Frostbite says, cards and activated abilities cost you an additional 1 to play or activate. At the end, or at the beginning of your end phase, or when you play a card or activated ability, destroy Frostbite. So basically it taxes our opponent because we give them Frostbite tokens. So basically what we want to do is we want to slow our opponent down with Frostbite, all the while blasting them with powerful arcane magic. So that's kind of the vibe here with Icelander. I would say this deck is the medium difficulty one. I think Dromai is actually harder to play than Icelander. And then Phi is the easiest. So yeah, that's Icelander. We also have her weapon, the Waning Moon. It's a once per turn instant, so you can do this on your opponent's turn as well. For 2 resources, deal 2 arcane damage to target hero. If it's not your turn, instead deal 3 arcane damage to target hero. Activate this ability only if you played a non-attack action card this turn. So what you want to do, the basic flow of this Icelander deck is you go non-attack Waning Moon. So you want to be able to activate Waning Moon and plan non-attack in the same turn. So the magic number here is 3. You want to be able to generate 3 resources and play a 1-drop and then immediately follow it up with a Waning Moon. So a single blue pitch card plus a 1-drop and Waning Moon is a really solid turn. So for the equipment here, we're going to see some dupes that you've already seen before, like the Helios Miter. Here we have the Conduit of Frostburn. This one is an Ice Wizard equipment. It has Quell. We've already talked about Quell, which is really good defensively. Instant destroy the Conduit of Frostburn. The next card you play this turn, with an effect that deals arcane damage, gains. When this deals arcane damage to a hero, destroy a frozen card in their arsenal. And we do have ways to freeze cards in our opponent's arsenal, so this can come up here and then. We have the Quelling Slippers. We have Spellfire Cloak. So this is an instant ability. Destroy the Spellfire Cloak, gain 1 resource, but you can only activate this on your opponent's turn. But that's fine because, you know, we'll need those resources to play our Waning Moon or any other stuff from our arsenal. It also has Arcane Barrier 1. We also run the Coat of Frost. This is a really, really good card to help slow our opponent down. Action, destroy Coat of Frost. You create a Frostbite in your opponent's control, which is really, really good. We also have the Glacial Horns. This actually pairs really nicely with the Conduit of Frostburn. This is action, destroy Glacial Horns, choose a hero, freeze up to 1 card in their arsenal and 1 ally they control until the start of your next turn. So this is really good at freezing Dromai's dragons. But also you can freeze stuff in their arsenal. A frozen card, by the way, just means it can't be played or activated. So you can crack your Glacial Horns to freeze an ally and something in their arsenal, and then you can crack your Conduit of Frostburn to blow up that card in their arsenal if you're able to deal the damage. We also have Null Rune Boots, which just has Arcane Barrier 1. You would literally only run this against another Icelander or Kano, just another arcane damage class, so I suppose it's also quite good against Rune Blades. We also have Null Rune Gloves, Quelling Robe, and Iron Rot Helm. Put these in against, you know, various decks that you see fit. Honestly, my standard loadout for this deck would be the Miter, Conduit, Spellfire, and the Quelling Slippers. I like putting this card in against Dromai, and I like putting this card in against Fi to help slow him down. So that is our standard loadout for the Icelander deck. Let's talk about the cards in the deck. These are going to be a little bit more simple than the Dromai cards. We have Aether Hail, Frosting. These are just Ice Wizard actions that deal arcane damage. So Aether Hail does 4 arcane damage, costs 1, blocks for 3. Frosting does 3 arcane damage, costs 0, blocks for 3. What makes Aether Hail so good is because Aether Hail plus a blue pitch card, which will generate 3 resources, means you can play Aether Hail for 4 arcane damage and then immediately activate your Waning Moon with the other 2 resources for 2 more arcane damage. So Aether Hail actually represents 6 damage plus, you know, your Waning Moon. Frosting is basically the same thing, just 1 less arcane damage and 1 less resource. These are also really good for fusion effects, and we'll talk about fusion effects when we get there. We actually don't run very many reds. We have a little bit of reds and then a ton of blues because we really care about blue cards. Here is Arctic Incarceration, a really, really good red card. It's a 0-drop. It just says create 3 Frostbite tokens under target hero's control. It doesn't have Go Again, but remember, our Waning Moon has a instant effect. So you can play the Arctic Incarceration and then still Waning Moon your opponent for some damage there. And also generate those Frostbite tokens. Aether Ice Vane is incredible. It says deal 5 arcane damage to any target. If Aether Ice Vane was fused and deals damage to a hero, they discard a card unless they pay 2. So this is great. It always forces something out of our opponent's hand because they either have to discard a card or pay 2, which also usually means pitching a card. So 3 for 5, if you can do that Ice Fusion, is great. And Ice Fusion just means as an additional cost to play Aether Ice Vane, you can reveal an ice card from your hand. So you play the Aether Ice Vane, as an additional cost to, you know, paying for it with the resources, you have to reveal the card to get that effect. Really good. Polar Cap is similar. It's a 2 for 4 arcane damage fusion. If it was fused and deals arcane damage to a hero, they get a frostbite token. So great way to slow them down. Here we have Snapback. I think Snapback is a ton of fun. It's a 1-drop. This one's actually from a different set. This one's from Crucible of War. It's a 1-drop. It deals 3 arcane damage to target hero. Note that this one is to target hero, where all of the other ones are to any target. So all of these other ones can hit Dromai's dragons, right? But the Snapback cannot. It can only hit a hero. It says, if you played another wizard non-attack action card this turn, you can play it as though it were instant, which is really, really good. So you can have explosive turns on your opponent's turn if you play one of these blue cards at instant speed from your arsenal. And then you can immediately follow that up with something like a Snapback and your Waning Moon to do a lot of damage as a surprise on your opponent's turn. And lastly, we have Ice Bolt. It's very similar to these other cards here. It's just a 2 for 5 arcane damage, but it's an ice wizard action. So it counts as an ice card, counts as a wizard card. This is kind of a cycle here. We have a 0 for 3, 1 for 4, and a 2 for 5. The 2 for 5 is a little misleading. Well, it's still really good, but it's harder to play to follow up with the Waning Moon because it's a 2, so you need 4 resources to do that. Still quite solid. I really think the MVP out of this lineup, though, is the Aether Hail. It's a premium card. And so for the blue cards, we have a lot of the same stuff, but also some other things too. So we have Ice Bolt, Frosting, and Aether Hail. Same kind of deal as the red versions, but keep in mind, since these are blue pitch cards, we can play them from our arsenal on our opponent's turn, and since they're ice cards, when we play them, our opponent also gets a frostbite token. So it's kind of like a double whammy here. Play it on your opponent's turn, and they also get a frostbite token. Aether Hail, once again, is the MVP here, because it deals 2 arcane damage, but then you can immediately follow it up with a Waning Moon for another 3 damage, because it's our opponent's turn. So this is 5 arcane damage for 3 resources, and they get a frostbite token, which is good. So these cards are absolutely fantastic. We also have Arctic Incarceration, same deal as the red version. This is a 0. They only create 1 frostbite token, but if you play it on your opponent's turn using Icelander's ability, they'll create another frostbite token from Icelander's ability. So there's actually a 0 for 2 on our opponent's turn, which is good. And then once again, you can always follow it up with a Waning Moon. Here we have an attack action. This is Winter's Grasp. It's a 2 for 4 attack, but we mostly don't use it to attack. We use it to block because it blocks for 3, and we use it to pitch, and we use it to fuse because it's an ice card. Next up, we have Cold Snap. It's another ice card. There's an ice action. It's a 1-drop. It says target hero may pay 1. If they don't, freeze a card in their arsenal or an ally they control until the start of your next turn. So this is where that Conduit of Frostburn can come into play. It says if Cold Snap is played from the arsenal, draw a card, and also has Go Again. So this is really good to play from your arsenal on your opponent's turn at instant speed because you get a draw card. You have this effect, and then you also generate a frostbite token for them from Icelander's ability. Next up, we have Amulet of Ice, another ice card. This is a 0-drop with Go Again, instant. Destroy Amulet of Ice. Target hero discards a card unless they pay 2. Activate this only if you have Ice Fuse this turn, and we did have a good number of Ice Fusion cards. We have more as well. So this is great. Just rip something out of our opponent's hand. Also, you can use it to fuse. Also, it's a blue pitch. Also, it's an ice card. Just good stuff here. Winter's Bite is another card that I really, really like. It's a 0-drop. It just says target hero discards a card unless they pay 1. Go Again. We really want to do this on our opponent's turn from the arsenal, so we give them a frostbite, and we have to, force a card out of their hand. So really, really solid card. Also, it's an ice card. So once again, you have this giant chunk of ice cards, so we should not have much of a problem fusing our ice stuff. Look at this. We have a giant chunk of ice cards. Also, synergizes with all of our Icelander shenanigans. Here we have Pry. So Pry is a 0-drop. It says target hero reveals a card from their hand if Pry was played during an opponent's turn, and we can play this on our opponent's turn because it is a blue pitch card from our arsenal. Then they reveal all cards in their hand. You can choose a card revealed this way. If we do, they put it on the bottom of their deck and then they draw a card. So it doesn't deny them a card, but it does deny them that specific card and it gets replaced. Still really, really good for messing with our opponent. Also, remember, all of these played on our opponent's turn, we can immediately follow up with Waning Moon for 3 arcane damage. Here we have Aether Ice Vane. This is the blue pitch version. This is a 3 for 3 fuse. They have to discard a card unless they pay 2. Really good. We have Snapback, same kind of deal as the other Snapback. If we played another non-attack, we can play this as an instant. This one only does 1 arcane damage. We have Scalding Rain. Scalding Rain is good for the same reasons that the Aether Hail is good. It's a 1 cost 2 arcane damage, so 1 for 2, which means we can play it on our opponent's turn for 2 arcane damage and then immediately Waning Moon. So it's actually like a 3 for 5 on our opponent's turn. It just doesn't, it's not an ice card. And also it can only hit heroes, not allies. And then finally we have Ice Bind. This is a 0 cost ice fusion, deals 1 arcane damage. If it was fused and deals damage, freeze a card in their arsenal until the start of the next turn. So this is a little bit of freezing here. It's a 0 for 1, just a good way to turn on our Waning Moon so we can do a good old 2 for 4, which is not too bad, but also it's a blue pitch card. And so that is going to be the Icelander deck. Essentially, you just always want to play a non-attack and then Waning Moon, and then slow them down as much as you can with our freezing and discard effects. And last but not least, we have FAB, the Draconic Ninja. This is the easiest deck to play by far because it is just a straight aggro deck, but you do have some tricks here that make it more interesting than it would seem. So FAB says you may start the game with a Phoenix Flame in your graveyard. So let's go find a Phoenix Flame. This is a Phoenix Flame. It is a 0 cost, 0 attack, 0 block, Draconic attack action. It says if you control 2 or more Draconic chain links, Phoenix Flame gets +1. So that's kind of the crux of this deck. We really want to have 2 or more Draconic chain links, and it itself is a Draconic attack action, and so it'll get a +1 there. So it doesn't seem that great, but it's actually really good because you almost always have access to it because of FAB. Because FAB has a second ability, once per turn instant for 3, return a Phoenix Flame from your graveyard to your hand. This ability costs 1 less for each Draconic chain link you control. So if you control 3 Draconic chain links, you can get that Phoenix Flame back for free. So for this deck, your goal is to play a Phoenix Flame every single turn. So Phoenix Flame plus 4 cards in your hand, you can usually attack with 5 or 6 different things in a single turn. That's kind of the goal here, just to force damage through. And he has the standard 4 intellect and 20 life. Our weapon of choice here is the Searing Ember Blade. It itself is a Draconic Ninja weapon, so it counts as a Draconic chain link. Attacks for 3, once per turn action for 2 attack. If you control 2 or more Draconic chain links, it gains Go Again. Now, one thing to note here is it counts itself as part of a Draconic chain link. So if you play 1 Draconic card that has Go Again, like this Rising Resentment, 0 for 3 Draconic Go Again, then if you attack with Searing Ember Blade, it counts itself as a Draconic chain link, so it'll get Go Again. So you only need really 1 other thing. Also, because it costs 2, this deck runs more yellows and blues than the Dromai deck does because we have cards that cost more than 1 and 0. But you also frequently attack with the Ember Blade. Very, very commonly, you'll be attacking with Phoenix Flame and Ember Blade. Your opponent will see these a lot. So let's talk about some of our cards here. Stubby Hammers is so good that it probably should be banned. It says action, destroy Stubby Hammers, attack action cards with 3 or less base power, gain +1 while attacking this turn, Go Again. And you might be thinking to yourself, that doesn't seem that good. Well, think about it this way. If you have 4 cards that attack for 3 or less in your hand, plus your Phoenix Flame, which also attacks for 3 or less, it actually has a base attack of 0, this represents 4 to 5 damage by itself, which is insane for a piece of equipment. Maybe even up to 6 damage. So really, really gross, really good card. We also have Heatwave. Heatwave is similar to Stubby Hammers, but it also has Quell. Heatwave says instant destroy Heatwave Phoenix Flames you control, gain +1 until end of turn, which is really good. So it's more specific than the Stubbies. Stubbies, I would say, is the better choice, but once the Stubby Hammers gets banned, you can run Heatwave. Also, the art in Heatwave is really good. Next up, we have Tide Flippers. This one is a ninja leg equipment. It says attack reaction, destroy the Tide Flippers. Target attack action card with cost 2 or less base attack has Go Again, and that does come into play here. But it also has Arcane Barrier 1, so this is a card you want to play against Icelander. We also have the Hope Merchant's Hood. We already talked about it with Dromai, just really good for kind of like mulliganing your hand. Vest of the First Fist is amazing in this deck. It says whenever an attack action card you control hits, you can destroy the vest and get 2 resources. So this lets you immediately attack with Ember Blade for free, which is really nice. Or something else. We also have Iron Rot Helm for defensive, Iron Rot Legs for defensive, Plate for defensive. We also have the Sash of Sandakai and the Helios Miter. But honestly, I like these other options a little bit more than these. So basically our standard loadout for this one is going to be Stubby Hammers, Tide Flippers, Hope Merchant's Hood, and Vest. So you can kind of swap them out as you see fit. Maybe sometimes you'll want to swap out the Tide Flippers for the Iron Rot Legs, or whatever else you want. But this is kind of our standard. The Vest and the Stubbies are both incredible. All right, let's give a quick rundown of the deck. Basically, like I said, we always want to play Phoenix Flame, and we almost always want to attack with our Searing Ember Blade. So the name of the game is play as many Draconic attacks as possible. So we have 2 Phoenix Flames. Phoenix Flame, by the way, is important other than that, because we have cards that let us get Phoenix Flame back to have these crazy turns. So something like Inflame here, it's a 0 cost, 1 attack Draconic attack action, blocks for 2. When you attack with Inflame, if you've played another red card this turn, you may return a Phoenix Flame from your graveyard to your hand. So you can do some absolutely crazy stuff with this, where you do things like, attack with a bunch of stuff, including a Phoenix Flame, right? And then you manually clear your combat chain. You just say, hey, I clear my combat chain. Everything goes into the discard pile. And then you play your Inflame, because you've already played another red card this turn. Then you get to get this Phoenix Flame back from your graveyard and then play it again, which is really, really good. So yeah, I really, really dig Inflame. Plus the Stubby Hammers means you can deal a ton of damage. Next up, we have Brand with Cinderclaw, and we're gonna see a lot of cards like this. This is kind of like the bread and butter of the deck. We just want 0 attack card or 0 cost cards that attack for 3 or higher and have go again. That's the name of the game here, right? So this is a 0 for 3, block 2, go again. It also says your next attack this combat chain is Draconic, in addition to that's other types. So that kind of can come up with some of the cards like our Scar for a Scar here. We have Rising Resentment, another 0 for 3 with go again. When it hits, you may banish an attack action card from your hand with cost less than the number of Draconic chain links you control. If you do, it costs 1 less to play, and you can play it this turn, which is great. So we can banish something like our, where is it? The Searing Strike. We can banish the Searing Strike and then play it for free because it costs 1 to play normally. So that's really good. We have the Ronin Renegade, 0 for 3 with go again, which is very simple. These are all Draconic ninja cards. Lava Burst is one of our finishers. It's a 0 for 2, but if we play it at Chainlink 4 or higher, it gets +3, so it comes in for 5. So this could be a 0 for 5, which is great. And we could use the Tide Flippers on this card because it has a base attack of 2 to give it go again, which is great. Also blocks for 3. So this is kind of one of our finisher cards. Scar for Scar is a 0 for 4. We were talking about this, just a great card. Has go again if you have less life than your opponent. We just want to be aggro, just throw all these cards at your opponent's face. Here we have another 0 for 4. If you played another red card this turn, it has go again, so it's really good. Keep in mind the Scar for Scar is not a Draconic. Everything else is though. Next up we have the Soaring Strike that I mentioned. It's a 1 for 4 with go again, blocks for 2. If it hits, you can banish an attack action card with cost less than the number of Draconic chain links you control. If you do, it gains go again, and you may play it this turn. Not as good as the Rising Resentment, but it can come up here and there, and 1 for 4 is not bad. Speaking of that, we have another 1 for 4. 1 for 4 with go again. Dust Runner Outlaw, that's all it does. That's all it needs to do. Here we have Flame Call Awakening. This lets us tutor for more Phoenix Flames if we need them. So this is a 1-drop, attacks for 3 with go again, and it says, when you attack with Flame Call Awakening, if you played another red card this turn, you can search your deck for a Phoenix Flame and then put it in your hand, which is awesome. Once again, just really, really good at going super wide. Next up, we have another big finisher with Flying Kick. It's a 2-drop, so this is a really good card to play after you've hit and used your Vest of the First Fist for some resources. It's a 2-drop, attacks for 5, blocks for 3. If it's played Chainlink 3 or higher, it gains +2, so it's basically a 2 for 7 if played chain link 3 or higher. So it's a really, really good finisher at the end of a long combo chain. Next up we have Rising Resentment. This is just the yellow version. This is the one that you can banish a card and have it cost 1 less. Pretty good. Salt Lawoon is another really good finisher. So this is a 0 for 3, attacks for 2. So it does have base attack 2, so you can give it go again with your Tide Flippers if you want to. Salt Lawoon gains +1 for each attack that has hit this combat chain. So you can do a lot of damage with Salt Lawoon on really big turns where you play a lot of Phoenix Flames and just go super wide. So it's another great finisher. Here we have one of our few defensive cards with Springboard Somersault. It's a 0, block 2 defense reaction, and if you play it from Arsenal, it blocks for another 2. So it's a 0, block 4. It does say it's a rare here, but it was printed as a common in the Iro Welcome decks, so it is legal in Commoner. Just really good. All of these yellow cards and blue cards are also just super good for playing our weapon, because the weapon costs 2 to attack with. Here we have a couple different things with the blue cards. So I'm going to run through these ones really quick. We have another Brand with Cinderclaw, 0 for 1 with Go Again with the effect to turn our next attack into Draconic. It's all right. Rising Resentment, 0 for 1 with Go Again to do that banish thing and have the card reduced by 1, which is all right. Most of these cards, by the way, they're just good to play and use as resources. Ronin Renegades, same thing, 0 for 1 with Go Again. These all just have, they're just 0s for 1s with Go Again. Sometimes they have effects, sometimes they don't, but we really care about them just being chain links or resources. The last 2 cards here, Cinderskin Devotion and Lava Vein Loyalty, they're just not as good versions of some of these other cards normally, but they serve a specific purpose here. So this is a 1 for 2. If you control 2 or more chain links, it has Go Again. So that doesn't seem great. What makes it good is because it's a blue pitch card and it blocks for 3. And if we still need to in a pinch, it does count as a Draconic chain link. But most of the time, this is a resource card or a blocking card, because a lot of our other cards only block for 2. So blocking for 3 is actually not too bad here. Lava Vein Loyalty is exactly the same thing. It's a 0 for 1. If we have 2 or more Draconic chain links, it has Go Again. But once again, it blocks for 3. These are basically the same card, more or less. But we mostly want to use it for resources and for blocking. And that's basically the deck. You just play a whole bunch of Draconic attacks, and then you finish them off with a Lava Burst, Flying Kick, or Salt Lawoon for, you know, tons and tons of damage. This deck's a lot of fun. You just jam cards down, and sometimes you can do some shenanigans, getting those Phoenix Flames back, pumping them all up with your Stubby Hammers, recurring them with the Inflame. But most of the time, it's just going as wide as possible. And that is it for our Uprising Commoner Battle Box. Let me know what you think of this in the comments down below. I think this is an absolutely perfect way for you to kind of like take that next step as a new player in Flesh and Blood and build your own decks. And these, like I said, are like tuned decks. They don't have any Majestics or Legendaries or anything like that, but they still play very well and they do feel very powerful. So these are all highly recommended. I think they're just a ton of fun, and they're dirt cheap to make because they're all common cards, full of cards that are worth like 5 cents. Build this up if you're a new player. If you're an established player, hey, maybe build this battle box and give it to a new player because it's, you know, basically dirt cheap to make. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked the video. Please let me know in the comments down below if you'd like to see more stuff like this, maybe different battle boxes. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.